Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, that's Sanford Hess, and this is Row Reviews Rewind, the show where we rewind the clock a little bit and we talk about newer movies and sometimes older films, because this is a rewind after all. So we're going to do a director spotlight this week on director Bong Joon-ho, and we're looking at two films, 2006's The Host and then 2019's Parasite, Bong Joon-ho's latest effort. I'm going to turn it over to Sanford to describe The Host to you, because it's one of those films that starts out simple and grows complicated. You'll learn throughout our conversation that is Bong Joon-ho's forte, his stylistic choice. So I'm going to leave it to Sanford to talk to you about The Host. Sanford?
All right. Well, The Host starts off with, I love how The Host starts off because it really gets the, well, how did this happen part out of the way immediately. The movie starts with a American base in Korea, and they're showing a scene where basically the bad American doctor is telling the Korean worker to pour hydrochloric acid down the drain, or was it hydrochloric acid or some other kind of toxic chemical.
Yes.
And even though the worker says, no, this isn't good, the doctor says, yes, I'm telling you to do this. And so the movie gets off to a rocking start because they simply say, hey, those people poured all these toxic chemicals into the water, and then the movie sort of jumps forward in time to what would you call the result of the toxic chemicals? It was a mutation. A mutation of something, I don't know. Has formed, and now we have The Host. And from this point forward, it's more or less a straight monster movie. The Host is a large organism. It's not really clearly defined what it was before it mutated. Nope. But it's large, and it sort of is swimming around in the river. And this is another strength of the movie, I think, is that the movie starts off after this being has been created with a introduction to a family of a father and a son, and really it's a grandfather and a son, and then the son's daughter. The son is a good-for-nothing. His daughter seems to be, relatively intelligent and hardworking, but the son is definitely good for nothing, and the grandfather tolerates the son probably more than he should.
Right.
And they run a little food shack right next to the river, and just when things are sort of getting off to a slow start, and they introduce that there's another character, which is the sister of this sort of good for nothing guy who's an archery expert, and then there's another sibling, which is the brother who's college educated. Just when they sort of get into this slow motion introduction of the family, bam! The Host kicks in, and from that point forward, it's a straight up action movie.
Right.
And this being, and I love the part of it also because this good for nothing dad, who's essentially the main character in the movie, is a key element in so many parts of the movie. First of all, he's the first one who throws things at the Host, throwing a beer can at the Host, which winds up aggravating it so much so that it starts attacking people.
Right, and eating things.
And what happens from there are some really wonderful crowd action scenes. I can only imagine how hard they were to direct because the Host is computer generated. But the movie kicks on with the Host essentially eating people and stealing people, including, most critically, the good for nothing dad's daughter.
Exactly.
And just when you think that she's been taken and is dead, she calls him,
right,
using, and actually this is kind of interesting, the way the movie sort of went back and forth through time. She calls him using the phone of another victim of the Host. So it turns out that rather than being eaten, she was brought back to its lair, and she is still alive, and she has called him and given him an idea of where she is in the sewer system and wants him to come pick her up.
Not to mention the little kid gets regurgitated.
That's right, yeah, and that, that's essentially the Host is bringing people back, regurgitating them into its lair to be eaten later, and she is hiding out, and eventually another kid shows up who is still alive, and she sort of takes over that one. Now, I will say this, probably about 30 or 40 minutes into the movie, most of the action has happened. and the remaining hour and a half or so of the movie become this slow motion.
Let's find her. Let's save her. Let's rescue her.
And that part drags. I'll admit that. I think that one of the things that this director needs is a stronger editor, because some of these scenes really go on for a long time. But ultimately, there is the expected process where they begin hunting for this daughter. The family sneaks back into the area around the river, which made for some interesting scenes of how they kind of get the materials they need to sneak back. Mm-hmm. They sneak back in. They hunt down the host eventually to its lair. No, they don't hunt down the host to the lair, but they do reconnect with the daughter. There's a sort of final action scene, which turned out pretty good.
And a final sacrifice. Which we'll talk about in terms of the movie. And the movie ends with a pretty rockin',
conflagration at the end. And of course, it's the classic, and I don't know what the term in the cinematography is, but if you show a gun in the first act, you better use it by the third act.
Chekhov.
Then I would say if you show a bow in the first act, you better use the bow in the third act.
Exactly.
Yeah. So on that level, the movie turns into a somewhat generic monster movie with this climactic ending. Okay. So, Chike, what did you think of this movie?
Honestly, because this is pre-Godzilla.
Okay.
Pre-Godzilla remake. When I say pre-Godzilla remake, I mean post the 1999 Godzilla that we got.
There's a lot of Godzilla
and then
remakes.
Pre the one that we got recently, and I believe it was 2016. This is a better monster movie and with more engaging characters than that Godzilla remake.
Yes. I never saw that, but I'm going to say yes, I'm sure it was better than the fifth Godzilla remake.
And I think the thing that ties it together is you may not think that these people like each other, but there is a deep love there. It's just not shown right away, and I think that's the skill of this director. He may make things slow in pacing in the second act, but there's always a point to that, and it's just waiting for that point to resolve itself. The action is well shot, which is something we always have a problem with in cinema these days. The characters are engaging, and there are tiny twists, not big ones, tiny twists, that make the whole ride worth it. Is it a great film? No. Is it a really good monster movie, considering in that decade we hadn't really had any? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll agree with you that. I mean, as a monster movie, it's excellent, if you look in that genre. Because, like you said, there's humanity there. There's a family, and we care about the family. Unlike, now that you remind me about the Godzilla, I did see it. So a Godzilla movie like that, you've got a character over here, and somewhere way off in the distance, a different character, and you've got a couple people you're supposed to care about. This movie has a core family that is directly linked to the one living victim for a while of the host.
Yeah.
And I think that grounds this movie as you care about these characters, and they're flawed characters.
Yeah, and it's not just archetypes, though.
Right.
They all have different personality traits that make them unique, and that's another trait of Bong Joon-ho that you'll see in our second film review. But I think that's what makes the characters engaging, is the director really allows you space, emotional space, physical space, to care about these people, no matter who it is in his films. And I think that's what makes him such a great director. You follow those characters, but you're also subliminally following the story.
Right, and I think at the same time the characters are flawed enough that they're not they're not archetypes like you said, like the dad. Let's talk about the dad for a second, because as we just found out very quickly on the internet before we did this is an actor who he definitely likes to work with.
Right.
The dad in The Host is an extremely flawed character.
Right.
He is basically useless.
Mm-hmm.
And even, it even creates part of the problem, for example, with the host by being the first one to antagonize it.
Right.
And then later on actually gets his father killed because he can't keep track of how many bullets is in his gun.
Exactly.
So he has a lot that is undesirable about this character. And at the same time, there's good things about the character, his loyalty to his daughter, for example.
Right.
But I like the willingness, for this movie to have a character who's kind of the main character is sort of you don't really want to root for him because he screws up so much.
Right.
So I do admit that I like a movie that takes a slightly different attitude about that.
Now, does that make you like that character and that family more or less?
It makes me like it doesn't make me like the character. Because, I will admit, I had an emotional reaction to this character, which was, why is this guy such an idiot? He should take better care of his daughter. And I think that emotional reaction came from me being a parent myself.
Right.
Right? So but at the same time, I like the family more because maybe I felt more for the daughter because the dad was such a screw up. Mm-hmm. And I also found the relationship between the grandfather and the father intriguing because the grandfather really tolerated and tried to defend the son. I didn't think he did a very good job. And by the way, I really didn't care for the grandfather as an actor.
Nope.
I thought he was horrible. Really bad. In fact, I thought a couple of the performances in this one were pretty wooden. The only one I really liked actually was the daughter, who was I thought she delivered a good performance. But boy, several of the people were just overplaying their roles.
Okay.
The archery daughter and the father. There's the one scene where they're all sort of overreacting in the funeral area. Yeah. Where they're all just laying on the ground and screaming, and I just did not understand where all that was coming from, and it was turn off.
Which is a direct contrast to something that happens in the second film.
Okay. Well, we'll go there in a second.
Speaking of which, does that mean you recommend the host? Do you say, stay away from it?
No, I recommend it, but I think people need to understand what kind of movie it is. To me, it's a monster movie. And, I would say it's more analogous to like Creature from the Black Lagoon or something like that than a drama or any kind of psychological, movie. So for that reason, if you want a good action movie that's a monster movie, and, from a gore perspective, I don't think it was that gory. I'm trying to think. The creature mostly swallows people.
Yeah, he doesn't bite off limbs or anything crazy.
Right. So from the perspective also of looking for a movie that isn't on the gross out scale, it's pretty good. I do recommend it, but I would not recommend it if people are looking for something that is, say, intellectually stimulating. Because I think ultimately there's not much that the host has to say as a movie. No. Do you agree with that?
I don't think so either. Other than that family can come from anywhere.
Okay. Wait, real fast. What'd you think of the ending of the host? Plot spoilers ahead.
I can't say I didn't like. That's why I said family can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
The idea that, spoiler alert, the daughter dies protecting the one little kid that was in the host's mouth and then got spit out is amazing and great.
Yeah.
And the fact that, I hope I'm getting this right, the son finally took responsibility and decided to take care of that said child.
Right.
Amazingly good.
Right. Yeah, I agree about that. I always respect a movie that has the integrity to kill off a main character. And I thought that the decision in the movie to actually let the daughter die was really brave and left me with a much better feeling about the plot of the movie than if it had been the happy, we saved our daughter, everything works out in the end kind of an ending. So I really respect the integrity of the movie to not do that.
As do I. We'll find that is a motif that is repeated.
All right. Well, let's go there in just one moment. Do you recommend the host?
I don't. Even though I like the monster movie element and I like the family, it just didn't draw me enough.
Yeah.
But the next film did.
All right. Well, let's go there.
The next film is Parasite, made in 2019. I'm not going to give you the starring names of the actors because that would be, unfortunately, too difficult to say. But let's just say it's a mom, dad, a sister, and a brother. And they live in squalor in this town that they live in, which I'm going to assume is somewhere in Japan, Tokyo?
Korea.
Korea. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Korea.
they don't actually say where it is. I'm assuming it was in Seoul, but I mean, it could be anywhere in Korea.
Anywhere in Korea.
Yeah.
And let's just say this: they're dirt poor. There's a scene early on where they're happy because they can get free fumigation because of the bugs that are in their home. What happens is, and I'm gonna try and not be too spoiler about this, but the son has a friend come over unexpectedly and says, "Hey, I've had a rough week, but I've got this job and I've got to go off to school. Do you want to take this job as a tutor for this girl?" He says, "All right, she seems okay. She's cute. I'll take it on." He tutors her, but he realizes the person he's tutoring, her family is rich. There's a mom, dad, a very young son, and the daughter he's tutoring. And systematically, one by one, once he realizes how much money he's making from working for this family, he systematically replaces people inside that house that are working for that rich family. First it starts up with the daughter being a art teacher to the young son. Then it's the dad who the daughter surprisingly frames for having sexual activity in the...
Wait, clarify. It's not the dad she frames. She gets her dad a job by framing the driver.
Right. She gets her dad a job by framing the driver, by leaving her underwear in the car, making it seem like he's had illicit relations in the car. And then finally the mother, which is the hardest to replace, is... because there's a maid who's been a housekeeper for the family for several years. They get her replaced because she's allergic to peaches. And so at one point, the entire family is working in this house in one capacity or another.
Right.
And the rich people are viewed as simpletons. Right. Now, I'm going to go deep into film criticism mindset here. There are so many varying parallels of parasitism within this film. Not only this poor family mooching off this rich family for money and experience, but you've got the previous maid who's doing the same thing for a reason we don't learn about until later. You've got the young daughter who's being parasitically feeding off of... you've got the daughter that's being tutored, parasitically feeding off of the poor son who's tutoring her because she doesn't have romance in her life. You've got so many different instances of people just feeding off each other for either emotional support, physical support, or just advice in general. So that parallel runs throughout the entire film. And that's part of what makes this film so amazing for me, is not only do you have this family of people who aren't really trying to be criminals, they're just trying to get by, really. But you have...
I think that gives them a little bit too much of a pass. I would call them grifters. I mean, they're scheming people.
Yeah, fine, I'll give you that. They are scheming people.
Yeah.
But it's a very engaging family, and there's some surprising twists we won't go into until a few minutes from now. But Sanford, for now, what did you think about Parasite?
I found this movie to be not as good as you, I think.
What?
Yeah. I thought this movie was interesting on a couple levels, but some things are really unsatisfying to me.
Okay.
I think, I can't put my finger on it yet, but what was unsatisfying was what was the point of this movie? What is this movie trying to say? Is it trying to say that, these are grifters and they got what they deserved? Is it trying to say that parasites should be, that being a parasite is bad? Is it trying to say that this is just an interesting story? I did not like the way that the movie resolved itself, which we'll get into the ending, because I felt like what happened to the characters wasn't necessarily just or right.
I was going to say there may have not been enough just for you.
Yeah, I guess I like some justice in my movies. I don't know. So, but and then the other part of it is the movie was, and to me, I mean, especially watching The Host first and then Parasite second, you can see how he's developed as a director. I mean, there are some really amazing cinematography and shots in Parasite, but it was filmed in this wonderful, beautiful house.
Yeah.
That to me, it's cheating because there's so many interesting shots you can do when you're in a set or a house that's just that stunning.
Yeah.
So. But that being said, it was wonderfully shot. I mean, the movie was wonderfully shot. There were a lot of interesting layouts. Even the opening scene where you see the window
and
the camera kind of pans down into the action, and then later on it returns to the same shot at a different time in the movie and starts in the same thing and pans down and something else is going on.
Spoilers: the end of the movie.
Right. I thought that was great. So I mean, there was some really interesting cinematography and things like that. I thought that the acting was better than The Host, but at the same time, for example, the daughter in the family, I really didn't like her as an actress. I did not like the way that she delivered her lines. I did not like the tone that she was using. It just seemed, it seemed wrong. It seemed false to me. The daughter in the Grifter family, I should say. So she stuck out to me as an example. And then the mom in the Grifter family also. I didn't really like the... So this is I'm going off on a tangent. Something else I didn't like about The Host was the tone of it was irregular.
Yeah.
At times, The Host was sort of a broad comedy. At times, it was a horror movie. It was a little bit all over the map. This movie had a more solid tone throughout, but some of their performances were just kind of skewed from that.
I mean...
Sorry, go on.
Okay, let me be blunt with the audience here. Poor decisions were made throughout this film. Decisions no one would make.
Decisions by the characters.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if you find the humor in who the characters are, you kind of... It's possible to excuse it. I'm not saying you should.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's possible. For example, there's a cute little lyric line that they do at the beginning of the movie when they're trying to have the sister and the brother remember what the sister's whole bio is. And
right.
That's cute and interesting, showing their little connection there. And then you have, her... later on talking with the mother after the first art lesson saying, your son makes great art, but, it shows signs of, mental illness, specifically schizophrenia. And you're thinking, well, come on, maybe explain why she said that. And they basically say, well, I read about art therapy and thought about mental illness and just cobbled some stuff together. And you're like, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, I have no problems with that. Let's go back to your statement that people don't react the way they would in the real world. I think that's my problem.
Yeah.
And I've said this on other shows, but I will accept any, if a movie sets up and says, hey, this is happening in space and people have 3 heads or whatever, I will accept whatever paradigm the movie puts out there as long as the movie is logical and consistent in what it's doing.
And I think the movie was consistent in what it's doing. But it took a turn that was so wild.
Yeah.
Toward the end. Okay.
Yeah.
We need to spoil this movie.
Yeah, go. We're far enough along. Plot spoilers coming.
Plot spoilers coming. So they work for this family for a while, right? And then all of a sudden, one of the characters that they got booted, the maid, the housekeeper, comes back and basically says, "Hey, I left something in the house that I need to get that's vitally important," and she gets herself wedged between a cabinet and something else.
Yeah.
And then, they free her, and it turns out that there is a bunker/panic room below where her husband has been living for the past 4 years, 3 months, 17 days.
Another parasite.
Another parasite. And his only way of communication is through messing with the lights and doing Morse code, hoping that somebody, i.e. in this case the son, the youngest son of that rich family, would see and get him help and get him out.
Yeah, I found that to be kind of a weird thing, but it came back at the very end as being of use.
Yeah. Again, Chekhov's light, Chekhov's gun.
There you go.
So that happens, and then the mom basically tries to frame the poor family and say, hey, I'm going to tell the wife that, you guys are not who you say you are, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden the phone rings. And that's when things kick into really high gear. Because they've been lounging around thinking that this family is going to go on this massive camping trip, and they won't be back for days. And then it turns out they got rained out, so they're coming back, which means all the people who aren't supposed to be there, meaning the son who's the tutor, the daughter who's the art teacher, and the father who's the driver, need to hide. And they also need to make the old housekeeper scarce. Because if that's discovered, that's also a problem. What this culminates in is food being made for dinner for that rich family, and the rest of the family literally hiding under a table.
Right.
This I didn't agree with.
You didn't agree with hiding under a table?
No, that wouldn't have been enough for me, because they would have found him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the family is sitting there with the three people hiding under the table and the dirty food all over the floor, because they even show that they didn't clean up all the food.
Right. And
they are completely oblivious to that.
Right. So that happens. Then what follows is they basically...
Well, what follows is a long and drawn-out period of suspense, which I will admit had people in the theater who was with me, like next to me was a young lad of about 12.
Oh God!
Who was
God!
He was writhing in pain during the suspense, and somebody behind me also was basically kicking my chair because they couldn't deal with the anxiety of what was going on in this tense scene, which went on for a long time.
But it was really good that it went on for a long time, because you're like, how are they going to escape? And then when they finally do, you're just like, really?
Yeah.
Like, that was my only other point of unbelievability. But let's just speed this up. It all culminates in the party for the young son, where, I'm not kidding you, every member that has been working in that house gets invited. The driver gets in on the act. The art teacher gets on the act. The mother, who's the housekeeper, is supposed to stay there, so she's obviously going to be there. The son, who's the tutor, who's been making out with the girl who he's supposed to have been tutoring, has to be invited to this party. But what they don't know is that the man that's been down there for 4 years,
3 months, etc.,
and 7 days, finally gets free. And he only gets free because the tutor son says, I'm going to go down there. Oh, I should mention another subplot.
Well,
the apartment.
Keep an eye on the time before we get too much into
this. The apartment that they're in, we originally see them in at the beginning of the movie, gets flooded.
Yes.
So they have nowhere to go. But they're thinking about, well, this guy and his wife are still down there in the basement, because that's where we locked them after the confrontation. So he goes up there and decides, I'm going to kill this guy. And the guy gets the upper hand and smashes his head in with the rock he was going to use. This leads to that guy escaping and then stabbing the art teacher daughter.
Culminates in a lot of stabbing and death.
Right. And
so, does the ending justify, because given the time, does the ending justify what happened before that? Or what'd you think of the ending? How about that? I'll make it easier.
I liked the ending, but my problem is this. I would have wanted a flashback with more time with that guy before he got entrapped down in that basement.
I didn't need that.
A minute or so.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that I assumed he was the driver or something. They implied that. But
Was he?
I think so, because he seemed to know the house and work in the house with the maid. I don't know. But I will say this. I mean, I agree with you that we didn't really know who that character was, but I thought he was interesting looking. I mean, there was a great subplot. I did not like the culmination of the end because I did not like what happened to the rich family.
The rich family just gets to move away.
Well, no. In the end, the rich family, the guy is stabbed. I did not like that twist.
Do you know why that happens, though?
Because of the smell, his complaints about smell.
Basically, he's been putting him down subliminally throughout the whole movie, outside of the smell.
Yeah, I'm with that, but I don't know. I just didn't. It was a twist that it didn't seem needed.
Oh, I agree. I said that same thing to my own dad. I was like, that twist didn't seem needed.
Yeah. And then and this is again the father in me, I did not like the fact that the son was going to be so traumatized. This was supposed to be the cure of his trauma in terms of the birthday trauma that they alluded to. And here, I'm left, and I guess, there's humor in this, but it's very sick and dark humor. What was supposed to be the son's trauma cure turns into a whole new trauma nightmare.
Exactly.
And I just, again, I walk out of this movie with this sort of black feeling around the darkness of what happens to that boy. And I guess maybe that feeling is what kind of keeps me from liking this movie. That's my final statement.
So you don't like it, but I do. I find that the suspense that they built up throughout the entire movie in terms of the pacing works. I like pretty much all the characters. I like the art teacher that he does not like. And I think that it is a movie about class and how even though you could be high class, you could be leeching off of someone else in many different varieties of ways. With that said, it did win the Palme d'Or at Sundance. And it is a very highly regarded film, but I don't like it because it's a highly regarded film. I like it because, as usual, it's a well-told story. And now that that story has been told, ours is coming to an end. We will see you in about a week or 2 weeks with more movies to talk about. And if failing that, if we don't show up, we'll see you in the new year. I'm Chike Coleman, that's Sanford Hess. This has been Row Reviews Rewind. We will see you guys at the movies. Bye, guys.